basically, since you guys are new here, everyone's new here, this is Evan, and he happens to be one of the people who inspires me. And this is going to be all about just people who inspire me and what inspires them. I want people to leave this feeling inspired. Yeah, and usually these people remind me that we're all connected in some way. Like, that's usually the type of inspiration that I'm left with.
Definitely.
So Evan Hatfield is 30 years old. We just celebrated his 30th birthday at one of his amazing shows. Cut to some footage. But he's one of the most talented live performers that I've ever seen, and I love seeing live music and live performances. He is a sitar player. If you don't know what a sitar is, it is actually a 18 or 20 stringed instrument.
I think this one has 20, but they range depending on the...
So what I learned is that you actually only play, like, how many of them?
There's, like, 7 main strings or top strings, and then there's a whole layer of strings underneath that resonate. Yeah. So those are... So if you hear, I'll play one note. Do you hear how that note keeps ringing?
So it goes through the other strings?
Yeah, so when I play that note, it will sympathetically resonate with the strings underneath.
Okay, so the strings are on top of each other. I'm going to show that too. It's so interesting.
There's two layers.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Let me see. Okay, cool. How did you begin playing the sitar, which is traditionally not a Western instrument?
Definitely not. I feel like I got very, very lucky. When I was 16, my grandparents were in this phase of their life where they were retired and just traveling all over the world. And I think I was like a senior in high school, and they were going to go to India. And they asked me if I could join them and go with them. And I was super excited about it. And then I talked to some of my professors at high school, I guess teachers in high school, and they said if I were to leave for a month to go to India, I wouldn't be able to graduate.
Oh, wow.
And I was really bummed about it, and I told my grandparents, I was like, I really, really want to go, but I can't do it. And they said, can we bring you back anything? And I had, grown up listening to the Beatles and George Harrison and all that stuff, and I was like, you guys should get a sitar. And I wasn't really expecting them to get a sitar, and then they came back a month later, and they're like, we have this thing for you here. And they had gotten an electric sitar in New Delhi, and I fell in love with it and started playing it and using my kind of guitar knowledge on it. And that's kind of how it all started.
That's amazing. So what instruments did you play before you started playing the sitar?
I started on piano when I was fairly young. I was probably 5 or 6 when my mom kind of put me in piano lessons, and I really disliked it from the beginning. It was very much a chore for me.
It's very structured, right?
Yeah, like very structured. And, for, 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 8-year-old, it's the last thing you want to do is, like, wake up and practice the piano. Yeah. And that's what my mom kind of, like, forced me to do. And now it's, like, one of the things I'm most grateful for in my life, that she was persistent with that and kind of like really twisted my arm to get me to practice piano, because it's like a language. It's like your parents speaking to you in French when you were like really young, so you would get it.
So how do you think your knowledge with piano and what other instruments do you play?
Guitar and saxophone.
Okay, guitar and saxophone, do you think how do you think they influenced your sitar playing and, like, now you're more live music?
I think the way Indian music is, like, taught and approached is so different from Western music. But I think what those piano lessons gave me, and those saxophone lessons and guitar lessons and all that, was they really taught me how to practice.
Yeah.
They taught me how to fall in love with practicing. And that's really what I got from those trainings from young.
I think sometimes we just want everything to be really enjoyable instead of realizing that sometimes that hard work and things that we don't enjoy in the moment actually will lead to moments where we really do enjoy them with those skills.
Definitely.
Okay, so I was reading an interview that you did at GCC.
Yeah.
Okay, so wait, let me go back actually. So
a lot less hair ago.
I know, actually, when I saw that, I had to zoom in on your picture, and I was like, is that Evan? I genuinely did not recognize you in that. Okay, so after you got the sitar from your grandparents, you were about 16 or 17 years old.
Yeah.
And then you began playing in Ojai. Is that correct? Were you living in Ojai? Or
So I grew up in a small town in Central California called Visalia, and it's one of those towns where nobody leaves there, nobody moves there. It's just very much a bubble. And I remember when I was around 18 or 19, kind of realizing that, being like, I gotta get out of here. And I had a few friends who lived in Ojai, and I was like, I'm gonna move here. I fell in love with this town. It's a very artistic, there's a lot of musicians and artists that live there. And so I decided to move there. And I brought my sitar with me, and I was kind of playing in different bands there with sitar. And I remember at one point I knew this tabla player there named John, and he called me and he was like, hey man, there's this sitar player coming to town, you gotta go see him play. And this sitar player was named Paul Livingstone, and he's one of Ravi Shankar's only American disciples.
And Ravi Shankar is
one of the greatest sitar players who ever lived, and he was the one who taught George Harrison. He was the one who really brought sitar into Western culture, the one who kind of introduced Indian classical music to a audience outside of India. And so this guy, Paul Livingstone, was playing at this Indian restaurant, and so I went, and he was playing with this tabla player, and I remember watching them and just being like, holy shit, this is different. This is I had never seen somebody who actually knew what they were doing on sitar play.
So you were before. A guitar player playing the sitar, and he was a sitar player playing the sitar.
Exactly. And I feel for most people who have never seen Indian classical music are very, when they see a sitar there and see somebody playing sitar, there's such an infatuation with the sound of it that to somebody who doesn't know sitar, to somebody who doesn't know Indian classical music, it's very easy to impress people with very little knowledge of it. And I was definitely playing that role for a long time before I saw Paul play it, and I was like, oh shit, I don't know anything about this, and started studying with him and eventually moved in with him.
Yeah, so I read that you actually did a 4-month intensive training with him.
Yeah.
Where you did 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours at night, and then you practiced throughout the day. How long was that practice in between, would you say?
It depended on the day.
And what was that like? I mean...
There was a period of time where I was probably playing 8 hours a day kind of thing. And it's intense, and I feel with sitar and with somebody who's not raised in that culture of music, you almost have to go through a period of time where you're obsessed with the music. You have to live it, breathe it, eat it, you
became
Yeah.
became the sitar for a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's still such a huge part of my life, and I still live across the street from Paul.
That's so amazing. And so his wife at the time was teaching at GCC, or she was doing art classes or something at GCC.
Yeah.
And you were interested in studying sitar, but they didn't have a program
at
the time?
Exactly.
How involved were you with, like, the creation of that? Because I actually have a quote from someone here. They said, Evan Hatfield's very driven about doing what he wants to do, and he's very intense about it. And he's always looking around for opportunities to grow, said Beth, the music instructor and organizer of GCC's Applied Music program. Partly due to him, we started offering sitar as part of our Applied Music program. We hadn't done any Indian music instruments until now.
Yeah.
And your teacher, actually, Paul, ended up working there?
He ended up working there, yeah, because I never finished college in Visalia, where I grew up. I never finished community college. Yeah, and it was like very much a sticking point with my family because I was like the only one who had not graduated college out of my entire family, and so Paul's wife was taking art classes at Glendale Community College, and I was like, okay, fine, I'm gonna go finish my associate's degree and just like go do this thing. And I started going through the music program there, and part of getting a degree in music is you have to have these applied music classes on your instrument. You have to be taking lessons through the school.
Got it.
And I told the head of the music department, Beth Pfluger, I'm a sitar player. This is what I'm doing. This is what I want to dive deeper into. And she was like, well, we don't have that here, and we don't have a sitar teacher here. And I was like, well, lucky
Guess
for
what?
you. Guess what?
One.
Guess what? I know one. So I ended up getting like lessons through the school from Paul in a very kind of like traditional Western approach of music education, getting these like Indian classical music classes through there.
So let's say the average viewer knows nothing about music.
Mm-hmm.
Can you try and explain what the difference even would be between Eastern and Western music at a very basic level?
Okay, so in Western music is built on three concepts. You have melody, you have your melodies, you have rhythm, and you have harmony. You have chords that are changing, and the melodies are moving through those chords. In Indian music and a lot of more Eastern traditions of music, you don't have harmony. There's no chord changes going on, and it takes the idea of melody and rhythm and pushes those two things to its like utmost extremes, like extremely complicated melodic and rhythmic patterns. So that's kind of like the biggest difference between those two things. Is like you're not going through chord changes, you're not playing chords on sitar, you're playing these very, very complex melodies to very, very complex rhythmic patterns.
I feel like I can always spot a musician in the crowd at one of your shows because of their fucking facial expressions that they're making. Like, everyone else is just enjoying it. We're like, we're vibing, but the musicians' faces are like, this guy is doing something I've never seen anyone do before, basically. Like, and that's what I love your shows so much. Oh my gosh. All right, let me see. I love it when you just answer these questions before you even get to them. Okay. Do you have any advice for up-and-coming musicians who are exploring maybe more untraditional instruments or avenues like that they're exploring? Any advice?
Yeah, so specifically on the less traditional instruments, find somebody who's really, really good at them and stick with them and practice as much as you possibly can. Because the thing with like sitar or a lot of like if you're pursuing an instrument outside of the culture that you grew up in, it's almost like you're competing with people who have been doing that since they were 4 or 5 years old. In the same way that like I started on piano when I was like 5 years old. There are kids in India who started on sitar since they were 5 years old.
Raga's in their blood.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So find one of those people who has that background and just like stick with them.
I guess that's why the apprentice-mentor relationship has been something that repeats throughout our culture over and over again.
Definitely.
How often do you see Paul?
Probably a couple times a week. Yeah, it's it depends on kind of the flow with both of our schedules, but having him across the street is a fantastic way to kind of make sure that I'm keeping up with my practice, and there's somebody who will be on my ass to make sure that I'm still doing it, you know.
I mean, I love waking up in the morning and seeing that you've already done your sitar. Like, it's like 5 a.m., 6 a.m., whatever time you wake up.
Yeah,
and do
definitely.
All right. Yeah, I love it. You answered so many of these questions. Like, your answers. You're a really good interview subject, just so you know.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You're a very good interviewer.
Thanks.
Interviewer.
You're the interviewee.
Yeah, there we go. Okay.
I'm the host. I was trying to figure out. Okay, this is a good question. What was it called? San Gabriel Building? Vertigo Park?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you used to play the sitar in front of the San Gabriel Building and Vertigo Park?
Yeah.
How was it, like, playing to a crowd, and, like, what type of reactions do you remember getting from people?
Yeah, well, when I was at Glendale Community College, there was... I'd have these, like, 2-hour-long breaks in between classes. And I'd always bring my sitar and practice outside, because so much... It was so weird to me, because in the music department at the school... they had practice rooms. These like tiny little like 5 foot by 5 foot no windows, just this like sterile little box.
Like, that's where we're gonna put a creative to practice.
Yeah, and I was like,
right?
No, that's not for me. And so there's like this courtyard in the middle of our school, and I was like, no, I'm bringing a rug and I'm gonna like practice here because I want to be outside. I want to like not feel like I'm just claustrophobic in this little practice room box. And I made a lot of friends that way, because this was also pretty much right after I moved to LA. Mm-hmm. I didn't know anybody here except my teacher and a few other friends I knew who had moved down here. But it was like such a great way to like break the ice with people, and it was always so interesting to see the kinds of people that would like stop and like come up and like even like sit down and like listen and talk to me and stuff, because it was such a interesting way to see curiosity in people. Yeah.
I always think of, there's certain artists like Marcus Wyatt, Goldcap.
Yeah.
And you are one of them, of the people that like you attract a certain type of audience member. Mm-hmm. Like you attract a certain type of person that is attracted to your music. They all have these qualities of like curiosity and like thinking outside the box, and like that's one of the things that inspired me to even start doing this series, because I would go to these shows and I'd be like, how do these people attract these? Like, what is it about them that attracts these people to these shows? Like, I need to understand this better, which I don't think I'm ever going to understand it. I think I'm just going to have to feel and experience it more.
Yeah. But I love curious people. And particularly, like, in kind of the days of being in music school and stuff like that. And because I was a little bit older than most people who were there. Like, I ended up going to Cal State Long Beach after I graduated from GCC. And, at that age of, like, early 20s, it's almost like a lot of people that age are like, stuck in between. It's like at that age, you're at the point where you're realizing that nobody really cares about like what you look like and what you do, and you can see the people who have like broken through that thing.
They get away from that, like their hometown, whatever that was, and they finally get to be themselves.
Yeah, exactly. It's
so
a
fun.
Beautiful kind of part of that kind of learning in life phase.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Okay. I have so many questions I want to ask.
Yeah.
So that kind of reminds me of something else that one of your quotes that I saw in this interview. Mm-hmm. So you said in this interview, music is something that can take you really deep inside of yourself or bring you out of yourself and look at life in a different way. Mm-hmm. There are people who are in their own bubble and they're very comfortable there. And I just want people to get out of their minds.
Yeah, definitely.
And you said this back in 2016. Do you think you still have the same like purpose or vision with your art? Definitely.
I feel like there's no rule book for the world. There's no reason why you have to have blinders on in your life, and I feel like a lot of people do. A lot of people are kind of in the mode of like, I have to do this. I have to go to this job. I have to be this way. I have to be
should. Yeah. Don't shit on yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like particularly this is like bringing me back so much to like my days in music school, because in being surrounded by a bunch of other music students all the time really shows you kind of the juxtaposition between what it's like to constantly be doing what you think other people tell you to do, or what you think other people perceive you're supposed to be doing, and like following that path, and people who are like, fuck it, now I'm going to do whatever I want.
That juxtaposition, that like contrast is probably so much more apparent. I bet you theater kids and art kids, like that whole world, they probably see it that way. Like they see everyone else who's just, they have to dress this way, they think they have to do these things, and your friends are just so unique and free and curious and weird that it makes you want to be unique and curious and free and weird. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, how does that inspiration work? How does, like, the inspiration of just being yourself translate to the people that are around you? Because I feel like that's where we actually have more power than we realize in this world, is, like, inspiring others, not by controlling others.
Yeah.
And, like, me telling someone else, be yourself, whatever, like, that's not, no one wants to hear that. They just want to see someone being themselves and being happy and free and...
Yeah. And I think it takes those people who have figured that out to be the most them they can be, and that will rub off on the people around them.
It is like a fire. It's like this like fire that spreads. Like I went to school for chemical engineering, so my brain works in this like analytical way. It's kind of hard to turn it off, but I always go back to like, science hasn't and won't be able to quantify everything. Yeah. Like we're probably never going to come up with a formula to explain inspiration, and maybe I should just stop trying to figure it out. But at the same time, I want to like explore it. I want this to be like a way people can just, I don't know, leave feeling inspired, because what is it? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it is very much like a positive virus.
Yeah. Such a good way to put it, though. I mean, it is. Like, come on, virologists, let's go. Your PhD in studying the virality of inspiration. Oh my God, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's so true, though. It is so true.
I love it. Okay. So this is the sections that I've written down were growing up and finding the sitar, college, and this next one is why he inspires me.
Okay.
All right. In a 2016 interview, the one that I've been referencing this entire time, shout out to the person who wrote that. I'm going to put you in the fucking comments. He wants to work in music production. He loves improvising and creating his own music, a mix of traditional Indian music and electronica. He confided the purpose behind his passion, and then that was that you want music to open up people's minds and things like that.
Yeah.
Looking back, this was in 2016.
That's wild.
You were playing the sitar. You hadn't started doing these live shows at all.
No.
What was the process getting to the point where you were doing these live shows, the Evan Hatfield experience? Mm-hmm. What was your first show? Like, will you kind of walk me through that?
Yeah, so it started very primitive. I think probably around 2017, I started playing with a couple of bands and playing keyboards and saxophone and a little bit of sitar in a couple bands that were much more on the like psychedelic funk sort of tip, which is super fun.
Seems your vibe.
Yeah, super fun. And so we'd play at a lot of these like desert parties and stuff, and like very renegade kind of festivals and things like that. And I had been messing around in my room at the time with my sitar and a loop pedal and a keyboard, pretty much, and like kind of making beats on the keyboard and then playing sitar over
So
them.
A loop pedal is just something that basically will like loop the music.
Yeah, you can like play something and then press the thing and it'll play it back in time.
Got it.
And so I'd been messing around with this, and then there was one festival called SoCal Psych Out, which was like out in Joshua Tree. Do you remember Garth? Did you ever go to Garth's place in Joshua Tree? It was a magical property. And rest in peace, because he just passed away like a week and a half ago. Yeah. He was a legend, but he lived a good life. He did. But there was this festival out there, and the band I was playing with, Paracosmic, got booked there, and they were looking for other acts to like fill the festival. And I was like, I want to do a set. I want to do like my own thing and see what happens. And I did, and people kind of dug it, and I was like, okay, all right, this is cool. And I started kind of like working more towards it, and then COVID hit. And this was the game changer for me. Like, COVID was the game changer because organizing a 7-piece funk group during COVID, when everybody kind of like moved out of LA, it kind of just disbanded. And I was left with a year and a half of just doing nothing but working on my own stuff, recording a lot of music, and figuring out how to create what I had in my head musically in real life.
How do I bring this thing in my brain into existence?
Yeah, exactly. So I remember just messing around and trying different pieces of equipment to figure out how to make what I had in my head come out. And after like a year of recording a bunch of music and figuring out how to do it live, my friend, who I believe you know, Itai. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So he, toward the end of COVID, he started doing these like little
one-night stands.
Yeah.
Was that your first one in
No,
August?
My first one was out in Joshua Tree, and it was like a weekend thing.
Got it.
And
so we actually met at this thing called Curiosity Bears. It is a community. That's all we need to say. It's a community. I would say it's like a trauma-based community with like Burning Man principles integrated into it. Yeah. And they have weekend-long events and one-night stands where it's just like one-night event. And he was performing at one in Joshua Tree.
And well, because Itai and I had like known about each other for a little bit, but I don't think we'd never met in person. Oh, wow. And he reached out to me. He was like, hey man, do you want to perform at this thing?
I gotta ask him how he heard about you.
Yeah, I think it was through a mutual friend who had like kind of connected us. And
virus.
And I didn't know anything about what he was doing, and I was like, you know what? I haven't performed for like a year and a half because of COVID. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. And I ended up playing a sunrise set for like maybe 10 people who were still awake at the time. Yeah, of course. And just in the middle of the desert, and it was such a reminder. It was like, oh, this is working. This is what I want to do. And then ever since then, it's just kind of been a slow growth and developing both the audience and the kind of music and performance aspect of it.
Those 10 people are so lucky to have been at that show. Like, so my first experience with Evan was at one of those one-night stands. I was incredibly high on acid. And I was laying in the cuddle puddle, and you know, the DJs had been going throughout the night, and I thought that that's what you were going to do when you came on stage. And one of my friends, Rasha, who we have very similar tastes in music, was like, you have no idea what you're about to experience. And I was like, all right, you know. And so like I got up and I'm like wandering over, and it was like my mind suddenly had been expanded on what those live electronic music shows could be like. I had never really experienced anything like that. And I feel like you were my introduction into, I think it would be like, who is like this? Like Satori, Monolink. Maybe Dear Humans would have been a similar vibe, you know? Where it's all live, it's all mixed, it's all in the moment. You're only going to experience it then. Maybe someone has a recording of it later, but there's just something about that inspirational, improvisational. There it is. No one's ever going to experience it again. Magical art that you and these other artists create. Was there anyone else before you started your own style of music who did a similar like live music show that inspired you?
It's hard because
it's such a unique thing that you're doing.
Yeah, and that's kind of the struggle of it too at the same time. Yeah. It's like, you know, if you're DJing, if you're there's kind of people who have paved the way for certain music traditions. If I was just doing sitar, like there's plenty of sitar players who have paved the way to kind of like understand like what needs to happen.
When you're an innovator like that, you
it's difficult because there's not really a lot. There's some acts in Europe that are kind of like doing similar live electronic stuff, and there's some stuff here, like you said, Satori and stuff like that, who are doing similar stuff, but as far as like people I know personally and are able to like go to for advice, it's like very limited.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
Rick Rubin, we need you.
Yeah.
He needs someone to. I mean, what are you doing? It's so cool to see. Like, I really feel like you're on this like cusp of like this new thing that's starting to be explored by artists, like with these pieces of technology that didn't exist. Did any of the stuff that you're working with exist 20 years ago? How, like... Actually,
it's funny you say that, because I'm doing what I'm doing in a very old school way. For
interesting.
The most part...
We'll have to go over his equipment later, and maybe I can explain that a little bit.
With a few exceptions, somebody could have done what I'm doing, like, in the 80s.
Wow.
Yeah. For a lot of people like Satori and like Itai has a new live set that he's been doing, they're using kind of more modern technology, which is driving a lot of these newer like live acts. I've always been very anti-computer, anti-planning when it comes to my live sets, and so I don't use a computer because I don't like to prepare things. I don't like to...
I totally get that. There's this... It's the freedom. I think I hate being told what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that there's this freedom, this beauty in this art that comes with the freedom that when you give a creative person just absolute freedom.
Yeah.
Like you don't put them in any box, mentally, physically, whatever.
Exactly. And also there's such a parallel to it to like traditional Indian classical music for me too, because in Indian classical music it's 95% improvised.
Wow.
It's like all done on the spot. It's like using the energy of like where you are at, like what you're feeling at that specific time. And I wanted to maintain that sort of principle in my own music.
So how do you take what's going on in your life at the moment and integrate it into your live shows? Do you have any examples of maybe something that was going on?
Yeah, definitely. So I think about it a lot to do with, so in Indian classical music we have ragas, which are basically, it roughly translates to mood. And there's like a bunch of different ragas that kind of invoke different emotions and moods. And there's, going into my sets, I always kind of choose in that 20 to 30 minutes before I start, like what am I going to start with? What raga am I going to start with? And it really has to do with like what's been going on that day, how I'm feeling in that moment. And you know, if you have a computer and your whole set is like planned out, you don't get to make those decisions.
That seems so much more like integrated, or authentic is the word I would say, because like let's say you were really angry or sad when you wrote a song, and then you're playing it and you're really happy. It's maybe you're not necessarily as aligned.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it's also, there's also, you know, the flip side to that is like not having stuff planned, not having the same set over and over again is also tricky, because there's something that happens when you're playing, you know, from touring with bands and stuff. I know what happens when you are playing the same set over and over and over again each night. It's both can get boring, but it also gets like extremely dialed. Yeah, it gets really good by the end of like doing the same thing over and over and over
That's
again.
why I love like a good structure, and then within that structure letting yourself go free. I mean, in this Rick Rubin book, actually, he talks about like implementing rules on yourself as a way to change your creativity, like, and mix it up. Yeah,
definitely. And also like with my setup, it's very limited. Like each piece of equipment does one thing. So not having a computer in my setup,
that's like fucking unlimited.
Yeah, it limits what I can do like drastically.
I mean, when the options are unlimited, it can seem a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah, it definitely is.
It really can be.
It makes decision making more difficult.
100%.
Yeah.
I've noticed that with like, so for a DJ, I just started messing around with DJing on like the bigger, the newer decks, like whatever, the professional decks, if you want to say. For the FX, there's like 5 or 6.
Yeah.
And on my computer, there's fucking like 30. And I'm like, which, I literally went on the other decks, I took a picture of it, and I was like, I'm just going to use those 5 or 6 because like, do I really need 20 different, like, do they really sound that different? My ears can't really tell, so I don't know if they can tell in the crowd, like.
There you go. I mean, there's a joke
lanes.
with like a lot of producers of like never finding the perfect like kick drum sample or something. You're just like spending hours like scrolling through things, and it's like in my setup I have like 2 kick drums I can choose from. It's like that's what we got. That's it, and it takes that split second of decision making and that split second of being fully in right brain or fully in left brain and
100%.
takes that out of the question. And I feel like that's key for any performer or anybody, you know, pursuing a creative field, is like the more you can just fully be in the flow and not have to think about technical things is like the better.
You really are explaining like neuroscience on a certain level, because there is a difference between our left brain and our right brain. The left side of our brain is for sorting and categorizing and comparing, and that's what essentially what you would be doing to those noises. Which one's better? Which one? Yeah. And you're taking yourself out of that creative. Just do it. Just bring it into existence. Feel it.
Definitely.
And music is actually one of the things that can activate every single part of your brain at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. It's like you want those 2 halves to be working in unison.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's what I think is like, if you're fully right-brained, you know, you're not existing in reality, I would say. If you're fully left-brained, you're thinking too much. Your thinking gets away from yourself. You know, you have to find that balance or that middle ground, and music is beautiful because it does integrate both of those things, you know?
Yeah.
You're not just meditating. You're not just studying. You kind of have to use both of those. Oh. Gosh, this is so good. All right, let's see. Done. Okay, now the future.
The future.
Okay. What are your future plans when it comes to music production? Do you have any plans to achieve them? What would that look like?
That's a tricky one, because I feel like at this point in my music career, so to say, I'm doing everything I want to be doing.
Yeah.
I just want to be doing them, like, I just want to continue to grow it.
Yeah.
I want my music to continue to expand and create the kind of continuously developing music that I have in my head. I just want to keep getting that out there, and I want to kind of grow to a bigger audience.
Yeah, of course.
I
feel like that's the easiest goal for him to achieve. I really envision you like straight up in India, like doing some crazy shit one day. Like,
I want to go so bad.
It really shocks me that you haven't been, but actually I do feel like when you are gonna go, it's gonna be the perfect time. Like, imagine if you went when you were in high school versus whenever you're gonna end up going. Like,
definitely.
That moment's gonna be so special now because of your love of sitar.
Yeah, definitely. I need to work on my Hindi.
Okay, dream venue, dream like collaboration.
Oh.
And dream audience member to experience your music.
Oh man, dream collaboration would be Fortet, 100%.
Oh fuck yes!
I mean, he was such a staple for my
gosh
early love of electronic music. He was like one of the first producers that I ever was like, whoa, you know.
And his combination of electronic music and art at Squid Soup, we were at the same show recently. Mind blowing.
Insane.
Are there any artists that you would like to collaborate with to have at your show in some regard?
Ooh, yes. Yes, okay. I know him personally. We used to be kind of close and have grown apart and kind of stay in contact a little bit. He goes by Orb Seer. Do you know Orb Seer?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, okay.
Yes,
okay.
I just saw him at Future Factory, his thing for the first time. Have you seen that yet?
I haven't. I keep missing it. They reached out to me to play at that
Bro,
and I was
the
already
fact that,
booked.
oh my God, we have to make this happen.
Yeah.
We have to make this happen.
Alon, if you see this.
No, I'm going to reach out to you. No, I swear to God. Okay. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, it was a 3D, almost like over 180 degree screen with the most insane visuals, psychedelic visuals I've ever seen in my entire life. Everyone was so immersed in this. It felt like it was coming on top of people's heads and stuff. No pun intended. And then at the end, I went up to Orbseer, and he said that they were doing it all improvisational, live.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a pre-recorded thing. He was going off of the mood and the vibe of the people in the crowd.
Yeah.
I think that is probably the most perfect collaboration I've ever seen. I will talk to Stormy this week to figure out how we can put this together.
I would love that. And
that would be so cool.
So he used to live at a warehouse called White Cube, like way back, like Glendale Community College days, that I used to go to like warehouse parties there. And that was like kind of my first introduction to the kind of like LA underground scene. And I remember meeting him and just being like, who is this guy?
I feel the exact same way about both of you, so we have to produce this. This is so great. I'm going to get this interview out so good so that when people are watching this, they're already going to know that there's this event they can come. You guys would be the perfect collaboration together.
I would love that. I would love that.
Wow. No, I would really love to help produce that.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow, I don't even know what else do I even ask? This is so good. Yep, you answered that one. So good. Mm-hmm. Cool. Ooh, this is a good one. Can you describe a specific moment during one of your live improvised sets where you felt an extremely strong connection between you, the music, and the audience? Like, was there a moment or an experience where you felt completely immersed and connected?
Yes. It's a rare feeling.
Yeah.
Most of the times when I'm performing, when I get off stage, it's kind of like, oh shit, I was kind of like in my head that whole time.
Yeah.
There are these rare feelings of like, okay, I am not even in my body anymore. I'm just like gone. And it's a really beautiful feeling. And I think there was this music festival, Lucidity, that I played a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. And first of all, Lucidity was like the first music festival I ever went to, and it was like life-changing for me.
That's so cool.
And a couple years ago, I like played my own set there for the first time, and I was like playing my set, and I had like 10 minutes left, and then I realized like it was like kind of in the afternoon, like people were vibing to it, and it was great. And then I realized, what am I doing like behind all of my equipment here? Like this, I want to be like in the audience. I want to be like with that. And so I like take my sitar and I like go behind my equipment and my like sitar cable's like running off stage, and like I get down like with the audience and I'm like playing, and I think it was probably at that moment that I realized like this is where it's at. The idea of a stage and like the audience is not really, it's appealing sometimes, but for the most part, like I want to be in that. I want to be with the people. Yeah.
I feel like since we've been born, humans are constantly trying to find a way to be like closer with the source or with the universe or whatever that is. And like that's why I think like you have 360 degree stages. Mm-hmm. This is why you're so special. Like instead of being like a performer that wants to be, you know, like look at me, you want to be in it. You want to be a part of it. You want to bring people closer to that source or whatever that is through your music and through your experiences. Yeah. And I see that, and that's why you inspire me so much. And I genuinely cannot wait to watch your career and what you do and like how you continue to inspire other people, because this was just, it was so perfect and it flowed so easily, just like your shows do. And I'm so grateful to have met you. I love you so much.
Oh, I love you too, Ginger.
This was just, it was so perfect. Thank you. I can't wait for people to watch this and just feel inspired and come watch one of his shows. Like, you need to do it now before he's too big. Like, he's one of those people that I genuinely feel that way about, is that, like, and you can say, I saw him when there was only 100 people, 200 people in the crowd, but I really just thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Oh, of course. I mean, this is the first of, I think this is going to be a really cool series, because I know a lot of people that make me feel the same way that you feel, and I want to just, how do we spark it? How do we,
Definitely.
Also, I forgot to say this in the interview, but I always envision you as like a mad scientist with music. Like like someone who's in a lab and they're experimenting, but you do it with music. Like, that's how so we need to make, I told Stormy, we need to make a little like graphic. It's like you like this, and it looks like you're in a lab, but it's like your stuff, your electric stuff in front of you, and you're experimenting. He's a mad scientist making music.
That's cool. I can see that in my head.
Beats.
That would be great. That would be great.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
so much. Sitar number 3.